what is asynchronous communication and when. Good morning, everyone. In the last class, we completed our discussion related to what is synchronous communication and what is asynchronous communication and when to go for synchronous and when to go for asynchronous also. And we discussed about REST template. We developed a client application by using REST template. So I developed a REST client application using REST template. We are able to send post request. We are able to send get request, and we are able to bind the data also to the binding object by using REST template. But is this REST template recommended nowadays? Is this REST template recommended nowadays? No. The REST template supports only synchronous communication. That is the reason from Spring 5.x version onwards, we are going for web client. Right. So can you tell me what is a synchronous and asynchronous? What is a synchronous and asynchronous, guys? What is a synchronous and asynchronous? Can you tell me the difference between synchronous and asynchronous? Synchronous means blocking client. Synchronous means blocking the thread until we get response. Asynchronous means non-blocking thread. Asynchronous means non-blocking thread. Synchronous means blocking the thread until we get the response. Asynchronous means it is non-blocking thread. Non-blocking thread. Perfect. Perfect. Synchronous means blocking the thread until we get response. Asynchronous means non-blocking thread. REST template supports only synchronous communication. REST template supports only synchronous communications. Only synchronous communication. Web client supports both synchronous and asynchronous communications. Web client supports both sync and async communications. REST template supports only synchronous communication. Web client supports both synchronous and asynchronous communication. Web client added in Spring 5.x version. Web client introduced in Spring 5.x version. Web client is part of WebFlux Starter. Web client is part of WebFlux Starter. Understood. Synchronous means blocking the thread until we get the response. Asynchronous means it is a non-blocking thread. REST template supports only synchronous communications. Web client supports both synchronous and asynchronous communications. Web client introduced in Spring 5.x version. Web client is part of WebFlux Starter. Web client is part of WebFlux Starter. Are you clear with my point? Let's develop one application. Let's develop one application by using web client. File new Spring Starter project. Spring Starter project. I'm making 40th application Spring Boot Book API client using Spring Boot Book Web Client app. I want to develop application by using web client, right? Dev tools, web dependency, Lombok. Along with this, I need to use WebFlux. Web-of-Flux, nothing but reactive web. Build reactive web applications with the Spring Web-of-Flux and Netty servers. Right? I'm using reactive web dependency, that is Web-Flux. If you want to use web client, then this reactive web dependency is mandatory. The reactive web dependency, nothing but our Web-Flux dependency. Web-Flux dependency. Okay. So now here there are two URLs available. One is get request URL. So this is my get request URL, and this is my post request URL. Get books. This is my post request URL. Get request URL is available and post request URL is also available. Now for this book client application, this application is running in the Heroku cloud. Okay, now I want to access this application. These are the REST endpoints. I want to access them by using web client. I want to access them by using web client. So for that, I have created a new project. So in that project, one new dependency I have added. That dependency is Web-Flux dependency, because this web client API available in Web-Flux starter. It is available in Web-Flux starter. All right. So here, if you see boot starter web dependency available, boot starter Web-Flux dependency is also available. Web dependency available, Web-Flux dependency available, and boot dev tools also available. And we are having project Lombok, and a test dependency is also available. Test dependency also available. Right. With this, we are ready with web client. So let me create one service class. Let me create one service class. Let me make it as a client. Book client. I'm creating one class called book client class. I'm making this class as a service by using @service annotation. In this service, I'm writing the logic to access that REST API. REST API is running in the Heroku cloud, and client application I am developing now. Okay, so I created a class called book client class. Now let's write a method. Let us write a method public void invoke get books. Public void invoke get books is the method. So here we have endpoint URL, string API URL. This is the method which is binded to. This is the URL of get endpoint. Now I want to access this by using web client. So as I told you, web client is a interface. REST template is a class, but web client is a interface. Web client dot create. So there is a method called web client dot create, which will give web client object. Which will give web client object. It is an interface. So using that create method, we are creating the object for the web client. Web client dot create web client object we got. Client dot get. So here, when you want to send a get request, then we will use get method. If you want to send a post request, then we will use post method. Client dot get. And what is the URL that you want to access? So you specify the URI, that is my API URL dot retrieve dot body to mono, that is my string dot class dot block. So this is the logic that we need to write by using web client. So here client dot get to send a get request dot URI, that means to which URL you want to send a get request. After sending a request, you retrieve the data from the response body, then bind the data to string variable at the client side. and make it as a asynchronous synchronous client. This is sending get request. Here I'm specifying endpoint URL, retrieve response body, retrieve response body, bind response data, bind response data, make it make it sync communication, make it synchronous communication. Got it. So like this we are writing this. Now string block I got system.out.println block. Whatever the response we are getting, I'm trying to print that response. Can you guys observe this logic once? Guys, I will be back in 2 minutes. Let me come back in 2 minutes. Let's observe this logic, how I am doing the logic by using web client. Yeah, guys. Now, are you guys able to understand the logic that I have implemented here? I have written a method. I have written a method. In this method, I'm taking my API endpoint URL that I want to access. This is the REST API URL which is running in the Heroku cloud. For that API, I'm building client application. For that API, I'm building client application, web client, web client dot create, which is used to create the web client instance. Web client is a interface, so we cannot web client is a interface, so we cannot create object directly. So I'm instantiating that by using create method. Now using this web client, I want to send a request. So as I mentioned, web client we can use for both synchronous communication as well as asynchronous communication, right? So here client dot get. If you want to send a get request, then we will use dot get method. If you want to send a post request, then we can use dot post method. So client, now this is the endpoint binded to get request. So I'm using client dot get to send a get request and dot URI. That means to which endpoint you want to send a request. I'm mentioning that dot URI, endpoint URL, then dot retrieve response body, retrieve response body, then body to mono, bind the response data. Currently, I am binding the response data to string dot class. If you want to bind the response to object, then you can specify a binding class here. Then your response data will be stored to binding class. I will do that. Then after, I am calling block method. Block method means it will make this call as a synchronous call. That means I am blocking the thread until it gets the response from the REST API. Once after we got the response from the REST API, I am printing the response on the console. I'm printing the response on the console. Are you able to understand the logic I'm writing here? Are you guys able to understand the logic that I have written here? Client dot get dot URI dot retrieve dot body to mono dot block. Block method is used to make the logic as synchronous. Dot block method to make our logic as synchronous. Currently, I am binding the response to string. JSON data will come from this REST API. That JSON data I'm binding to this. This string variable, it can be anything, guys. This string variable can be anything. It is just a variable name. It can be book or it can be block or it can be anything. It is just a variable. Variable name can be anything. Whatever the response I'm getting from the REST API, I am binding the response to the string variable, right? Variable name can be anything. So now that string variable I am printing on the console. This should print the JSON response we got from the REST API. Are you clear? Web client is an interface. We cannot create the object directly. I'm using create method. Client.get. So I'm sending a get request. Dot URI, endpoint URL I have specified. Dot retrieve. I'm retrieving the response body. Body to mono, string dot class, bind the response data. Dot block, making it asynchronous. Now let's go to start class. Let's access this. Let's go to start class and let's access this context, right? Now let us try to get the object of client class context dot get bean of book client dot class. I'm getting the bean object. I'm getting the bean object. Now bean dot invoke get books. I'm trying to call that method. So this is my start class from where my boot application execution is going to start. Start class having a main method. Inside the main method, we are calling run method. So that run method is giving context object. Using the context, I'm getting book client object. By using this book client, I'm calling invoke get books. Invoke get books is using web client. Using that web client, I'm accessing one of the REST API. I am binding the response data to string variable. So this client I developed by using web client. Web client supports both the synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. Let's try this now. Let's run this application. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. I'm trying to execute my application now. See, are we able to access that REST API using web client? Are we able to access that REST API using web client? Let's try this. My application is getting started. Guys, can you see? Are we getting any response? Can we see? Are we getting any response? What we got? Empty. So that means in that REST API, do I have some data? Oh, in the REST API itself, the data is not available. Do I have the data in the REST API? Is my REST API endpoint giving me the data? It is not giving me the data. It is a empty. So that is the reason I'm getting empty. Then let us insert some data by sending a post request. So can we send a post request first? Can we send a post request first so that we can access that get request? Currently in the REST API, data is not available. That's why it is giving empty. Okay, let us make a post request. Public void invoke save book. Public void invoke save book. So what is the endpoint URL? String API URL is equal to that post request method we need to invoke. API URL, we need to send a post request using this URL, API URL. Now, so web client object we need to create, web client dot create. We are using this client object. Now, client dot which method we need to send? Post method. Client dot post. When you want to send a get request, we are using client dot get. When you want to send a post request, dot post. Client dot post, client dot post dot URI, API URL to which you want to send a request. Now, here, are we going to retrieve the data directly? Retrieve and body to mono, retrieve body to mono, string dot class, then block, So is it correct, guys? It is a post request. Same code, whatever the code I have written below to make a get request, I'm writing the same code to send a post request. Same kind of code. The only difference I have done made is here I'm using client.get method. Here I'm using client.post method. But post request means we need to send the data, right? We need to send the data. How we will send the data? How we are going to send the data? Data we are going to send in the body. Data we need to send in the request body. Okay, let us create one binding class to represent the data. New class binding. Let me create a class called book Book class I'm going to use as a binding class to send the data in the body. And once I get the response, I will bind the response also to the book object. Private integer book ID, private string book name, private double book price. So this is my binding class. Let me bind the variables. I'm writing a setters getters for this variables. Now, so here we can write no args constructor and we can write all args constructor. We can write all args constructors also. Binding classes should be there at the both client side and server side. Now this is my client side. I'm writing a binding class at the client side. Book book is equal to book is equal to new book. Book is equal to new book. Book dot set book name. I'm setting some book name here, that is Angular. And book dot set book price. I'm setting some book price also. With this, I have the data ready which I want to send in the body. Now, how to send this book data in the body? That is what we need to do here. Before going to do that, let me store this into a variable. Yeah. System.out.println of that response, whatever the response we are getting from the REST API, that response I'm going to print on the console. For binding classes, we don't use a component or service. We don't make them as a Spring Bean. Bipin. We don't make them as a Spring Bean binding classes, right? So we will make the classes as a Spring Bean which are having the business logic like services, controllers, repositories, not the Pojo classes. For Pojos, we don't use the component and all, right? So book object I have created. In the book object, I'm storing some data. This is the API URL. It is binded to a post request. It is used to save the book at the server. So this is the book object I want to send. For that, I created a web client object, web client.post, web client.post. So this is .uri method to specify the endpoint URL. To specify the endpoint URL, then we have .retrieve method. .retrieve to get the response from the response body, bind the response to string variable, and wait for the response. I'm making it as a block. But where is the data? We need to send the data in the body. Na? I have the data in the object format. I have to send the data in the request body. Okay? Here we will use a method called body. What is that, guys? We are using a method called body. Now here body value method is available. In that body value, you can set the book object. Understood? Here, when I'm making a get request, I'm not setting any body data. I'm just sending a request, retrieving the response. Here, I'm making a post request. To make a post request, I'm setting body value book object. I have the data in the form of object. I'm setting the object to body value. Then that object will be converted to JSON. JSON will be sent to REST API as a payload. So I'm making a post request to the REST API using web client. Look at this program. Look at this program here. I'm specifying HTTP post request. This is my endpoint URL. This is my endpoint URL. This is my endpoint URL. HTTP request body. HTTP request body data. Retrieve the HTTP response body. Retrieve HTTP response body. Body to mono. Body to mono. Bind the response. bind response to string variable, make it as a sync client, make it as sync client, make it as sync client. Right. Now let us call this method first and see what is going to happen. Bean dot invoke save book method. I am calling this method first. This method is used to insert the record into a table using a REST API. Invoke save book. Before calling this, if I access slash books, I am not getting anything. I'm getting empty response from the REST API. Now let me execute this method. This method is having logic to send the post request with the book data in the request body that will insert the record into table. Let's run this application. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Can you see record is inserted? Now let's access this REST API. Are we able to see the data? Are we able to see the data? Come on guys. Are we able to see the data now? Yes, we got the data now. We got the data now. So with this REST API, we are able to get the data. That means we are able to send a post request to the REST API. Now let us make get request and see, are we going to get the response from the REST API? Now I am calling invoke get books method. Let us see, is my get request will be success or not? Yes, perfect. Are we able to get the response from the REST API in the JSON format? Are we able to get the response from the REST API in the JSON format? Come on, guys. Are we able to get the response from the REST API in the JSON format? So that means using web client, are we able to send get request as well as post request? Using REST, using web client, are we able to send post request as well as get request? Observe this code. Guys, everything, every line of code I'm writing in front of you and I'm explaining. It is not like I'm executing previous batch examples. I'm writing each and every line of code in front of you. There are two records available. I think somebody is inserted the record into my REST API. Somebody is inserting the record into my REST API. I gave this, what is that? Swagger URL. Na? Somebody from our class inserting the record into this application. So now total 3 records are available. Yeah, Bhunesh is doing that. Bhunesh confirmed that he is inserting the data from the Swagger. Okay, perfect. Now look at the code. This is the logic to make a post request. This is the logic we are writing. This is one method. So to execute this logic, I am calling that method in the start class. You got my point? This is one method. In this method, I have written the logic to make a post request. This method I am calling from start class. And this is another method which I am writing. This method is used to retrieve the data, and the data is binded to string variable. Can we bind the data? Can we bind the data to one object also? Currently, when I make a get request, I'm getting the JSON response. How I am representing the JSON response at the client side? How I am representing JSON response at the client side? Come on, guys. I'm representing JSON response at the client side as a string variable. I'm representing JSON response at the client side as a string variable. Okay, fine, guys. Can we bind the response to an object also? Can we bind the response to object also? Client side, can we convert the JSON response to binding object? How can we do that? How can we do that? How can we do that, guys? Come on. Can we write the logic again? Client dot get, client dot get dot retrieve dot body to mono. Here, instead of string class, what I will give? Book array dot class dot block. Okay. So if you give body to mono string dot class, whatever the JSON response we get from the REST API, that JSON response is stored into string variable. Now I am giving book array dot class. Now I am giving book array dot class block method. So here assign this to a variable. Now I got the response array, response data. Response data I got in the array format because I'm using body to mono as a array dot class. Now what I will do here, I'm going to iterate this array. I need to specify dot URI, that is my API URL. Yeah. Now for each book b colon response data, now I will specify system.out.println of b. So client is sending a get request. Client is sending a get request. API will send the response in the JSON format. Now can you see data is binded to object at the client side? Now you see I got the response. Book records are coming. The book records are coming in the form of JSON. The book records are converted to object. So where that JSON response converted to binding object, API is sending the object directly, or API is sending a JSON and JSON converted to object at the client side. How we are able to convert that JSON data to a binding object? Just we are specifying here. This client side, web client is taking care of converting the JSON data to Java object and converting Java object to JSON data. When I'm sending a post request, I'm using body value. I'm passing the object, book object. Book object data converted to JSON and JSON data sent to the REST API in the request body. This is post request logic dot post method. Here I am sending a get request. When I use body to mono string dot class binding the response data to string variable. Now here body to mono book array dot class. When I make a get request to this URL, it is giving JSON array with book data. That JSON array data I am binding to my binding array class, binding class array, so that I'm able to iterate the data in the form of objects. Is this clear? Is this clear? Anybody not able to understand web client? Anybody not able to understand web client development? Post request example. HTTP post request with web client. HTTP post request with web client. Okay. HTTP get request using web client. When we need web client development in organization, I told you that, right, Sanjay? If you want to make the asynchronous calls, HTTP get request using web client. I developed a client by using web client. We are able to send a get request and we are able to send the post request. Yeah, here the conversion will happen from JSON to Java object. Here the conversion happened from JSON to Java object. That conversion is happening internally. This conversion is happening internally. Web client is taking care of that conversion. REST template also will do the conversion, and web client also will do the conversion. Now currently my web client is working as a synchronous client, or my web client is working as a asynchronous client. Currently my web client is working as a synchronous client. My web client is working as a asynchronous client. My web client is working as a synchronous client. Can we make it as a asynchronous client? Can we make it as a asynchronous client? Can we make it as a asynchronous client? Yeah. What is the meaning of asynchronous client? What is the meaning of asynchronous client? Without waiting for the response, without waiting for the response, I want to execute my logic. Without waiting for the response, I want to execute my logic. For that we will use async. What we will use, guys? We will use async. That is a non-blocking thread. Non-blocking thread. Now, how to make it as asynchronous? How to make it as a asynchronous? Now, invoke get books async. Let me use invoke get books async. Okay, guys. Now, I am writing a method to make my web client as a asynchronous method, right? So how we will make it as a asynchronous thread? So what is that is, after making the request, don't wait for the response. System.out.println request sent. Request sent. I will not wait for the response. I will not wait for the response after making a request. After making a request, I will not wait for the response. That is called asynchronous communication. That is called asynchronous communication. How to make the web client as a async? To make the web client as a async, here we should not use a block method. When you use a block method, what is happening? It is making that client as a synchronous. It is waiting for the response when I use a block method. But I don't want to use a block method. I want to go for subscribe method. Which method we are going to use, guys? What is the method we are going to use to make it as a asynchronous communication? Subscribe method. Can you tell me what is the difference between this block method and the subscribe method? Async communication. Async communication. Block method means sync communication. If you use dot block, if you use a dot block, it will wait some time for the response. So I'm making that web client as a synchronous using dot block. But when you use subscribe, when you use subscribe, after this request is sent, it will not wait for the response. It will continue and will execute the remaining logic. But when this logic will be executed, after we got the response only, thread will continue further and will execute this logic. That is dot block method. Dot block method will make our web client as a synchronous client. After we got the response from the REST API, then only this logic will be executed. But when it comes to subscribe method, it will become asynchronous. After sending this request, it will not wait for the response. It will not wait for the response. Sir, then what about the response? When we get the response, I will create one handler. So now what I will do is, hey web client, you make a get request asynchronously. Don't wait for the response. You continue your execution. After you got some response, then execute some method. Public void response handler. I'm going to take it as a book array. I'm going to take it as a book array for book b colon books. System.out.println of B. This is my response handler. So now what I will do, this is book client colon resp handler. Book client colon public static void response handler. So for this subscribe method, I'm writing a consumer. That means you make a request, you make a request, you don't wait for the response. Subscribe, don't wait for the response. Continue your execution. After you got the response, then this handler will take care of it. After the response come, this handler will take care of it. Let's call this method now. Invoke getBooks synchronous, invoke getBooks asynchronous, bean.invoke getBooks asynchronous. Now observe carefully when I am using asynchronous, guys, which logic will execute first? Books will be printed or this logic will be executed first? This SOP request sent logic will be executed first or books will be printed first? Why the SOP should execute first? If the SOP is executing first, that means it is asynchronous. It is making a request. It is making a request. It is not waiting for the response. It is a non-blocking thread. It is making a request and it is continuing the execution. This SOP is going to execute. After some time, when the response comes, then this handler is going to execute. Response handler. Right. Now let's observe console carefully. I'm going to run my application. Run as boot application. Observe the console carefully. Observe the console carefully. Now see here, request sent. First SOP is executed, then books are printed. So it is a blocking thread or it is a non-blocking thread? It is a blocking thread or it is a non-blocking thread now? Non-blocking thread. How I made my web client as a non-blocking thread? How I made my web client as a non-blocking thread? Using subscribe. How to make the web client as a blocking thread? Using block method. Block method means synchronous communication. Subscribe method means asynchronous communication. Making web client, making asynchronous request using web client. Now you understood what is synchronous and what is asynchronous? Make asynchronous call using web client. 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 For that handling that response, I am using this handler method. For handling the response, I'm using handler method. So dot subscribe book client dot response handler. It is a method reference concept. So this web client is going to make a request to the REST API. It will not wait. It will not wait. It will not wait. So it will send a request. It will continue its execution. That is the reason this SOP got printed. When the response comes, that response will be taken care by this response handler method. That response will be taken care by response handler method. Are you guys clear with my point? Can I achieve this non-blocking concept by using REST template? Can I achieve this non-blocking concept by using REST template? No. REST template supports what kind of communication? REST template supports what kind of communication? It supports only synchronous communication. But web client supports both synchronous communications as well as asynchronous communications. How to make web client as asynchronous? block method. How to make web client as asynchronous? Subscribe method. Very good, guys. Very good. Is it difficult to develop a client by using web client interface now? Is it difficult? You just need to understand what are the methods we are using. 90% of the working people also don't know what is web client. Some people are still using REST template only. This web client is a new concept that introduced in the Spring 5.x version, which is used to develop REST clients. So if you use REST template, it supports only synchronous, right? But if you use web client, you can make the client as a synchronous client, or you can make the client as a asynchronous client also. Yes, mostly the REST client logics we are going to write in the service classes. We are going to write the REST client logic in the service classes. So with this, yeah, Kapil, web client is an interface. How can you create an object for interface using new operator? Web client is a class or web client is an interface? Interface. Okay, very good. Can we get the response entity as a response in the web client? No, that we can do. How to deal with the response to status codes in the web client, I will explain in the next session. First, if you guys practice this, then I will tell you how to get the status codes. Currently, we are getting this directly body, right? Body to mono we are getting. Flux and mono also will explain, guys. So ask me questions related to today's session. Whatever I have not explained, don't ask the questions on that. Okay. So are you guys comfortable with my today's session? What is web client? How to develop a client logic by using web client? Perfect. I will upload these notes also. So today we have written a lot of code, guys. We developed a client by using web client. How to send a HTTP post request by using web client with request to body data. How to send get request using web client, directly binding to string response and binding to this binding class, and how to make a asynchronous call by using web client. Okay, I will upload this class notes now. I will upload this class notes now. I want everybody to practice this program before coming to next session. I want everybody to practice this program before coming to next session, because web client is damn important. Web client is damn important topic. Damn important topic. So in every interview, they will ask the questions related to web client. How you will access a REST API, how you will develop a REST API, what is a synchronous communication, what is asynchronous communication, what is a REST template, what is a web client, difference between REST template and web client, how to send a synchronous request by using web client, how to send a asynchronous request by using web client, that we have discussed. Notes also uploaded. Can you guys check it? Is that notes displaying for you? Okay, perfect. Yeah, next, anybody having any questions, you can raise your hand.
Hi, sure.
Hello, sir.
Uh, Actually, this endpoint URLs in real time, like
Mhm.
in our mini project, hard coded. In the same way, in real time
No, no, no.
projects
I will
also.
tell you how to avoid that hard coded value. We are going to take them from the properties file or from the YML file.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ashok.
Yeah, good.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
Hi, sir. Anil here.
Yeah, hi, Anil.
Sir, I have created one student REST API, so I'm consuming using REST template, but meanwhile I'm getting client side some errors, sir.
Sure, sir. So we are completed with our web client. And tomorrow I will check all your issues.
Yes, sir. Please have one doubt sessions.
Sure, sir. Tomorrow I will do that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Hi, sir.
Sir,
Tell me.
yeah, actually, I did not understand that point, sir. We are subscribe response handler. You have mentioned subscribe book line to colon response handler.
Sir,
Response.
this is a Java 8 concept, sir. It
Okay.
is a method reference concept. So I'm calling the static methods by using method reference directly. It is the alternate for the Lambda. So whenever I'm giving a subscribe, this response handler, this
Yes,
book
sir.
line response handler method will be called. That method is taking book array as a parameter. Whatever the book array we got here, that will be passed to that method. That subscribe method will take care of that part.
Internally, it will pass to the book array
Yes,
objects.
yes, right. That is the reason we are able to access the object here, right?
Externally, we don't have to mention.
No,
Internally, it
you
will
know
take
it.
care.
Yeah, it will take care of that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, sir.
Sanjay this side.
Kapil this side.
Yeah. Hi, Kapil.
Sir, my question is that you already mentioned that, explain that we are using web client interface, and with the help of dot create method we are creating object for that.
Yes.
So like whenever we are using class like REST template, so we are creating with the help of new keyword. So like sir, whenever we are using new keyword, so that will store in a heap memory.
Right.
Sir, then interface, like what is the internal implementation where that object is stored? Sir, heap
Sir,
or
here in the heap only. This method contains the logic to create the object, right? Whatever the object it is creating, that also will store in the heap only. We are
interface
not.
object also is okay.
Yes, right. We are. This is not interface object. This is interface implementation object we are getting. Whenever you call web client dot create method, the create method will create the object for the web client interface implementation class, and it will return that object for you. If you want to see that, you can use client.getClass.getName. You will see which class object it is created internally to give you that object.
Got it. Both are storing in heap, sir.
Right.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Hello, hi, sir. Sanjay this side, sir.
Yeah. Hi, Sanjay.
Good morning, sir.
Very good morning.
This is regarding like we have been creating Swagger documents. So this is like when we are creating any book, like we are using that endpoint post for creating a book. So there is one field which is not mandatory, like that booking book ID, which we were entering earlier, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So how we can remove it from our
Then
Swagger documentation?
you need to maintain separate classes. Here, I am using a single class for request and response. Na? Then you need
Yes.
to use two separate classes for request and response. In the request class, you remove the book ID variable. In the response class, we will mention all the variables.
Okay, sir.
Currently, I'm using a single class. So for
Mhm.
response, I need that ID. That's why I'm using that. Okay. So if you maintain
Okay.
a separate class for request and response, you don't face that problem.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Prashant is here.
Yeah. Hello.
Sir, suppose we are using in a one project, three for synchronizing, three for us synchronous
Sir,
methods. Will
one
it be
second.
okay?
Santosh, lot of resound is coming from your voice. Can you type in the chat box?
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, am I audible?
Sir, Prashant, your voice coming with resound. Type your question in the chat box.
Okay.
Hi, sir.
Ashok, sir.
This is Srinivas.
Yeah. Hi, Srinivas.
Yeah, when I'm after deploying the Hero Cloud, I'm getting when I run that URL is there, right? When I'm opening that app, I'm
Yeah.
getting application error.
So do one thing. Tomorrow I will check that. Meanwhile, you can use my URLs and you can develop your client. Whoever is not able to deploy in the Heroku cloud. Yeah. Whoever is not able to deploy in the Heroku cloud, you can use my Heroku app endpoint URLs. You can develop your client logic. So in the doubt session, I will see what is the problem you guys are facing to deploy with the Heroku cloud. Don't wait for the deployment, guys. That is one a small concept. In the real time, we don't use Heroku. Heroku is one of the example I explained you
Okay.
to give you this endpoint URLs. So tomorrow I will conduct a doubt session. In the doubt session, I will see what are the problems you are facing. Today, you practice web client by using my endpoint URL. Is it fine?
Okay.
Sir, hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir. Bipin here. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Sir, can you enable this group discussion option in Telegram so that we can
Sure,
discuss?
sir. Sure, sir. I will do that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So there are some complications. That's why I'm not doing that. I will check it and I will let you know on that part. Okay.
So because same errors also I'm getting this while accessing from this Heroku cloud means some
Yeah,
error I am getting.
understood. Understood. Tomorrow I will check the doubts. So today you can continue with my API URL. Okay.
Sir, okay, sir.
So
Thank you.
deploying your application to Heroku is not mandatory because I have given my endpoint URL, which is running in the Heroku. You can develop client REST template, web client, you can develop with my URLs,
Okay,
my
sir.
API URLs.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Sir, actually, we have discussed for Spring Boot video, so I have done payment, but I am unable to access.
Could you please send a mail to admin team ashokitschool@gmail.com?
Okay.
Yeah. Guys, I'm repeating once again. Web client is a interface. I am not creating the object for the web client. I am calling the create method. Create method will create the object for web client interface implementation class and it is giving the object. REST template is a class. We can directly create the object by using new operator. Whereas web client is interface. We cannot create the object directly. We are using its implementation class object. Right. Anyone else having any question?
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
So good morning. Actually, when I was trying to create on REST API using at the time I used to condition if condition.
Because your voice is breaking, sir. I can't hear your voice. Your voice is breaking because. Yeah. Next one.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi, madam.
I am installing Heroku Cloud, so Git repository is not getting path.
Yeah. Tomorrow I will check the Heroku issue. Today you can practice with my endpoint URL.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Ashok sir. I'm Surya here.
Hi, Surya.
Yes, actually, with the India zone, okay, in AWS cloud, Ashok sir, I was getting problem with creating instance. Okay, so I choose that America,
No
US.
problem. You can use any region. No issue.
Okay, okay.
So in the India, we have a Mumbai region. So you can choose any region, but what is the issue in the Mumbai region? You should not get that issue, right? I'm using Mumbai region for all my classes.
Okay, so is there any issues with other using any other region?
No issue. You can use it.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you.
You are attending Linux classes, huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, guys, all of you attend the Linux classes. They are very, very important. Linux classes I'm giving for free.
Hello, Ashok sir.
Yeah, hi sir.
Sir, I put my question in the chat box.
एक मिनट में देखता हूँ. Yeah, if we send a GET request asynchronous, how we will catch the response? This is the handler method is available, right? So I'm sending a asynchronous request. For that, I'm using a handler. When the response comes, handler is going to take care of that response.
Okay, so we can implement multiple requests and response.
Yes, right. So for this asynchronous request, we got the response. That response will be taken care by one handler. If you have another REST API with asynchronous, you will write another handler for that. For every asynchronous call, you will create one handler to handle the response.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, like in this, whenever we are calling with that dot sign, right? So that will little bit confusion. It will like fetch from right to left or left to right. So can you explain a little bit, sir?
it is a method chaining, sir. Based on this method
Yeah.
return type, I am calling this method. Based on this method return type, I am calling this. Based on this return type, I am calling. This is from top to bottom. I mean to say
Top to bottom.
left to right.
Okay, left to right. Got it,
Yeah.
sir.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.